So there's 2 English dead in like 2 seconds, and there's only Drake and 4 other guys on the beach. And they all start shooting Drake and the rest of them, and they like retreat up along the beach, and they've got their little shields, little bucklers, and they just retreat under all this storm of arrows, basically. And then what happened is Drake snatches up, like charges forward, snatches up the arquebus, reloads it, and then turns it against the man who murdered the 2 guys. And one of the accounts of this says that Drake blasted his guts abroad. That's the quote. So he shot him in the abdomen and like blew his guts open, basically. And then all of the Indians just ran away, and they left him alone for the rest of the time. So Drake and his men were there for another month, and the Indians never came back. But yeah, so that's Drake. Kind of like he seems to have a kind of like a patronising view of Indians and Africans to some extent. Like he seems to like them so much that he lets his guard down a couple of times during his voyages, because he's always freeing slaves and offering them passage on his ships and giving them stuff, and he's always trying to befriend the Indians and stuff. And obviously that's paid off for him a lot. So it's no wonder he's doing that, because that's worked for him practically. Yeah. And obviously he must like them. I can't think of any other reason for his constant kind of efforts to befriend and have these positive relations with native peoples. But a couple of times it does seem to bite him in the back. He seems to view them not as because these are dangerous people. Some of them, obviously, they're all different, as I say, but some of them are incredibly dangerous, and some of them attack and kill his men. So he could have done with being a little bit less trusting of them, I would say. And this is one of them. So he's lost 2 men to this attack when it needn't have happened. You know, if he'd been a bit more standoffish with them, obviously it would never have happened. So anyway,
a great bit of the story, I think, is when they go into the Pacific. Sort of, well, it's for the first time as Englishmen, but just how virgin everything must have been, and how I don't know, just incredible, because they go all the way up to the North American coast, don't they, up to like California?
They do, yeah. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. They think so. He sails up Chile, at the coast of Chile. Well, no. So first of all, they get through the Straits of Magellan, right? No Englishman's ever. There's no chart that shows how to get through, and it takes him, I think, 14 days to get through.
Some of the most treacherous in the world.
Yeah, it's very treacherous. There's lots of channels and dead ends and stuff, but he navigates his way through blind in 14 days. And I think some other people before and after, Spanish people before and after, it takes them like weeks and months. Like some of them takes them like 60 days and 90 days to get through. But Drake does it in 14. And historians say, well, that's kind of a credit to his navigation skills specifically. And he had served as a navigator on previous voyages, so he was known as a navigator.
Boy from the mud flats in Kent turned out to be one of the greatest seamen of his age.
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. That's what a lot of people of the time said, like the greatest navigators of the age, and one of them is Drake. You know. So anyway, they get through, but then as they reach the Pacific, they're hit by the most almighty storm. It lasts for, I don't know, a month, I think, and it completely scatters the fleet. So one of the boats goes home beforehand. I think it's Captain Winter's boat. Oh no, it goes home during this storm, actually. They get blown all the way down to the very southern tip of the South American, the chain of islands, down to the south, the Great Ocean beyond. And they eventually, Captain Winter's ship, they shelter back in the Straits of Magellan, and then after a few weeks go, actually, we've had enough of this, we're going to go. So they don't join back up with Drake, they just go back to England. And the other 2 ships, that's not the Golden Hind, so we should have said really that the Drake's ship, he renames the Golden Hind after his benefactor, his coat of arms.
Right, so it was the
Golden Hind. Exactly. It was the Pelican, yeah. And then just before they go into the Straits of Magellan, he kind of renames it. It's kind of like, with Doughty has been executed, this is a new day, a new dawn.
It's small, isn't it, the Golden Hind? There's a replica of it moored up on Thames If you walk
Yeah.
along, is it on the south bank? I think it is on the south bank, the same side as the Globe, and it's just moored up there by
Mhm.
a little bar, a little pub, wine bar place, and it's
Yeah.
tiny. It's unbelievable how small it is to me, anyway. It seems incredible that you can
Yeah.
fit the number of crewmen that are supposed to fit on it, let alone any extra cargo. It just seems so small.
Yeah, definitely, and really narrow as well. You notice that, like it's like about, I can't remember, 16 feet across, something like really small across the beam, and it's about 100, 115 feet long, something like that. But yeah, like really small. And there was about 70 men, 70, 80 men on board, packed in. And yeah, so this massive storm hits them. They get blown all over the place. The other two ships are lost, sunk in this great storm. But Drake doesn't know that because they get separated. It's like the worst storm anyone has ever seen. All of the sailors on it, they've never seen anything like it. They're praying all constantly, fighting and battling the wind day after day. Don't know where they are, and they get blown all the way down. Well, they get blown north and south and all over the place. And they ended up getting blown down because the Straits of Magellan are not obviously the very bottom of South America. There's all those the Tierra del Fuego, all the islands and stuff. That mass of islands and all the rest of it below the continent of South America, sort of going towards Antarctica, right? And people before Drake was blown off course. No one knew. People thought that the South American continent continued all the way down to the South Pole, and there was only the Straits of Magellan was the way you could get through this continent. But Drake was the first person to sail around the bottom out into the enormous waves of the South Sea all the way around the bottom and say, actually, you can just sail down here. You haven't got to go through the Straits of Magellan. You could sail round the whole thing. And nobody knew that before him. Nobody knew that before he was blown off course. And there's a story about they go to the very southernmost tip of the southernmost island, and they land and they look around for stuff, and it's just this treeless, desolate wasteland with a constant high, strong wind just howling across this land. And apparently Drake goes to the southernmost tip of the land and stands on it, and stands on this like sea cliff, staring out and saying, I'm standing like no man has ever stood further south than me. Yeah, I just thought that's so
Cool.
Drake, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all in the name of good Queen Bess.
yeah. I think he names that Elizabeth Island actually,
Oh, right.
but then they never come back. So under the terms of like colonization, you have to not just claim it, but inhabit it or whatever. So but yeah, so he says I claim this for the Queen. It's called Elizabeth Island, and then he goes and I just love that. I just love that image of him standing in this, like in danger of getting whipped off the cliff into the giant seas below any moment, just to do it, just to say no one has ever stood further south than me. And then they sail back up the coast when the storm has passed, and they sail up Chile, up Panama, attacking ships as they go, and nobody has a clue that he's there. Ahead of him, he makes sure to stay ahead of the news. So he's just rushing up the coast, taking a ship, taking the cargo. Sometimes he takes the ship into his own fleet, starts building his fleet back up, and yeah, just making sure he stays ahead of the news. So he's going from place to place to place. If there's a small town, a small port, he might raid the actual port itself. A couple of ports he blockades. Some of them are the bigger cities that he can't possibly take. He just kind of goes around them. And a few of the local governors or whatever try and stop him, send out ships, but no one can stop him.
Is this when he gets the nickname El Drac, or like was he already known as that by this point? Already known as a
I
scourge
don't
of the
know.
Spanish?
I think he's already known as a scourge by this point. Yeah, definitely. 'Cause he's had about 4 great raids into the West Indies at this point, maybe 5, and one of them is where he steals the treasure. So yeah, he's kind of well known as a pirate at this point. But this is kind of unprecedented. Like I said, no one apart from the Spanish colonists have been there, and he has another run in with some natives, and he loses some men to some natives. But apart from that, he's attacking and he's asking everyone, "Where's the great treasure ships? I want the gold, I want the silver, I want the bullion, this is what I want." And he hears word of this treasure ship called the nickname for it is the Caca Fuego, right, which is Spanish for fire shitter. That's what he's chasing. So he hears, this ship is laden with silver and gold. It's insanely rich, this ship, and that's the one he's after. And he chases it down, and he takes another ship, and then they say, "Oh, we saw that ship. It was a week ahead of us, heading north. And so he goes to the next one. He finds another ship, takes that, and he's hunting it. And then, he ends up finding this enormous treasure ship, and they take it. They chase it down, and it surrenders, and they take all of the gold, and it's an absolute fortune. It's no one knows how much it really was because the Spanish claim it, and there's like claims and counterclaims, and there was official cargo. It's funny because the Spanish state is kind of somewhat more advanced than the English one at this point, like more sophisticated. But it's also like the English in that it's a lot of private enterprise, but on behalf of the state. Like the private enterprise is a part of the state, you know. And this ship was one of like the partners is the Spanish crown. So no one knows exactly how rich it was because there was lots of vested interests in claiming it was either this or that, or there was money not on the books and all the rest of it. So, but suffice to say, it was an absolute fortune, like a literal fortune. And they took that, but then they've been sailing for such a long time, and by now they'd sailed up the entire coast of South America and most of the coast of Central America, and the Spanish had caught up and started to organise, and they sent out expeditions to trap Drake and catch him, sink him, get the treasure back, all the rest of it. So he now had a choice about what to do. How is he going to get back to England? The idea they think his plan was originally just to sail back again. So back down the south coast, back down the coast of South America, through the Magellan Strait, and then back up the Atlantic to England. That was probably what he was planning to do. But he'd caused so much chaos that it would have been extremely risky, to say the least, to have tried that. And he still had one ship, plus he had he'd taken a couple of small prizes that he'd crewed, nothing really significant, and the Golden Hind, which was just one ship. And then the Spanish had, dozens of really big ships out now looking for him. So the first thing that they had to do was repair and restock and stuff. So they went to find a safe harbour, basically. So they sailed north, and no one knows how far north they went. One of the things that they think, like a secondary purpose of the expedition, was possibly to look for the Northwest Passage back to the Atlantic from that side. And he had a chart that said that the Northwest Passage definitely started where like California is, basically, or maybe where Oregon is. That's the how high up these charts said, yeah, this there. Like obviously, it wasn't there, but that's what he was looking for. That may be what he was going up so far to look for. And again, there's conflicting reports as to how far he went, but probably he did get as far as Oregon, what would become Oregon, and possibly as far as like Washington State.
There's some reports that the men were absolutely freezing. They were frozen. I heard one letter or one report that said the men were cooking meat over a fire, and between the meat going from the fire to their mouth, it had already frozen. So it may have been. They may have. Well. When are we talking? Like 1576, 77, something like that. Apparently, that was one of the coldest winters for like the fossil, like the rings of trees show that was the coldest winter. Oh no, summer. It was in the summer. I think we're talking June or July, and they were that cold. So it was the coldest one for hundreds and hundreds of years, apparently. But yeah, because one documentary I saw was there was like, it was the whole documentary really was like a debate around exactly where they touched in, whether it was somewhere near California, somewhere in California, somewhere near San Francisco, or if it was somewhere up near Oregon or even Washington State. And yeah, they were talking about Vancouver Island at the most extreme. But it was just loads about this when they put in and they made a little colony. It was like in the way. This predates anything we did on the East Coast, Virginia, or anything. So it's sort of the first bit of empire ever.
Yeah, definitely, and that's how they saw it as well, to some extent. So yeah, we don't know how far they went, but like you say, there's definite reports that they tried to go even further north, but their rigging and their sails were freezing. So the rigging was like just covered with thick ice, so that they couldn't pull any ropes, and the sails themselves were freezing solid and stuff like that. So it was certainly a suggestion that they did get really, really far north. But also they said that there was loads of fog and stuff. So there are multiple first-hand accounts. That one of them says that thing about the ice, but another one about someone who was on the ship. Like they took he took a Portuguese guy in the Atlantic, like a navigator. He took him prisoner and took him all the way around the world with him. He's got one account, and then there's other Englishmen who left accounts as well that contradict it. But what they do all agree on is that they, at least maybe probably as far as the Canadian border is now, something like that. That's almost certain, at least that far,
Right.
which is crazy.
Right.
That is way further than any
Yeah.
Spaniard went, way further. And then, as you say, they put ashore to repair their ships somewhere almost certainly around where San Francisco is. So
Right.
weirdly, they seem to have sailed right past San Francisco Bay and not realised it was there or something. Like San Francisco Bay, once you sail in through that little entrance bit, it opens out to this enormous, deep, huge harbour. You can sail right away from the. They could have tucked it into all these different corners and been totally safe, but they don't describe it either. So they probably just sailed right past and didn't see this incredible harbour. But anyway, just a little bit beyond that, there's a little hook of land, and they think that's where they landed. Beached the ships to, scrape all the barnacles off and stuff, and built a fortress, and started to, men could get exercise and look for some food and stuff. And then they met a bunch of the local Indians who would have been what are they called? Miwok people, something like that. Miwok people. There's some really weird accounts because like these people had never seen any Europeans, hadn't seen any Spanish people before. That's one reason they think they know for sure where it was, because the English talk about some of the there's like these white chalk cliffs, and they say, it looks like the cliffs on the south coast of
The
England.
cliffs
Not
of
Dover,
Dover.
but not Dover,
Right.
the further along basically. I can't remember what ones they are, but they're quite similar.
Yeah, Weymouth.
Yeah, basically like that. Yeah, just like that. And then they said that the land it looks quite like that. Like it's like around San Francisco. It's not like other parts of California where it's like really really hot and dry and stuff. It's quite damp climate. It's quite temperate in that particular area. So they've set up ship and they're set up shop and they're
Recalking the ship.
yeah, basically scraping all the stuff off, and then these massive of Indians come down, and they were friendly, which was lucky because there's loads of them, and they went and came back and stuff, and they did the same thing when they were trying to give them gifts and the rest of it, and the English described them as a people of tractable, free, and loving nature, without guile or treachery. And then after they'd been there a few days, these Indian messengers came down and were like trying to explain that something was going to happen. And then this huge procession came down, like with their chief, like the big chief of the area came down, like hundreds of people. And there was like, and they said at the head of this procession was some sort of official. They said like presumably he was a shaman or something. But he had this big scepter of black wood. On top, he had like crowns and chains and stuff made of like clamshells and stuff. And then there was a royal guard of like warriors, and then there was the chief who had like a headdress and a big cape, and then all the warriors were all painted and stuff. And then behind all the warriors there was all the women and the children coming, and the English went shit themselves basically. They went back into their fortress because they thought they were being attacked or whatever. And it turned out they were friendly, and they wanted to honor Drake in some way. And the English opened the gates to them, amazingly. And then all the Indians came in, and they came up to Drake, and they put like things around his neck and stuff, and they put a crown on his head, and they put a baton, like a ornate scepter thing, into his hands. And all the English were convinced that what happened is that the Indians had made Drake the king of their land, and they actually thought that this ceremony, like we don't really know what the ceremony was, like some kind of some experts in the modern era have said that it was perhaps they were kind of confused, that they thought that English were in some way visitors from the dead, or they were ancestors or something returned to them, because the women were like cutting their faces and stuff, which is what they did when they were in mourning. It was really really weird basically. But the English kind of thought that the local Indians had gifted the land to Drake, so he claimed it and said, this is now Nova Albion, and we claim this land, and the local people have named me the king of this land, and it's now mine. It's now English, and I'm the king of it. Amazing, like totally insane, really. Just and like you said earlier about this, he's a son of a Devon yeoman preacher, and now he's on the other side of the world being crowned king of this
Yeah, it's
It's land.
incredible, isn't it?
It's crazy, absolutely incredible. And then so when they repair all their ships and stuff, they're faced with a choice of how to get home. The Northwest Passage obviously doesn't exist, or if it does, it's so far north that they can't possibly sail to it. So they either sail down back through that all the defences of the Spanish, or do what they did, which was to set off across the Pacific Ocean, which again is absolutely crazy because it had been done by the Spanish a few times, but it is also crazy that they just went, okay, well, we'll just go the other way then, you know. Um,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
didn't have charts
Oh,
and stuff.
yeah. I was just going to say, you said then about how the Spanish had done it a couple of times. I thought it had only been Magellan had been the only person that had done it so far. Is that not right?
No, not quite right, because he was the first person that had sailed around the world on like in a single voyage.
Yeah, and
Uh,
didn't he actually
but
die in the Philippines? And it was someone
he
else
did.
that actually ended up doing it. So I don't know. I actually don't think it's fair to say Magellan was the first person to do it. 'Cause he didn't. He got to the Philippines.
He didn't do it
Um,
exactly.